The poet Maya Angelou once said, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." When you think about the coaches that had the biggest impact on your life, you probably don't think about the technical things they taught you so much as how they made you feel about yourself. Coaches have the ability to fill or drain something we call the emotional tank. Each of us has one, and you can think of the emotional tank as being similar to the gas tank in a car. If your tank is empty, you can't expect to go far. If your tank is full, you can go a long way. Lots of things affect how full our emotional tanks feel, including the events of the day, relationships, and how we choose to respond to these things. One of the great things about a full emotional tank is that it can help make kids more coachable. When athletes' emotional tanks are empty, they tend to be pessimistic, give up more easily, and are less receptive to coaching. When their emotional tanks are full, athletes tend to be optimistic, deal better with adversity, and are more able to hear what you have to say and do what you ask without resistance. Parents, coaches, and leagues that fill their athletes' emotional tanks tend to breed success. As coaches, we're either filling or draining our kids' emotional tanks. What drains the tank? Correction, because it can imply a mistake or something not done right. Sarcasm and disappointment felt by athletes. Some coaching actions and decisions that don't meet player hopes or expectations, such as the starting lineup for a competition, will have an almost unavoidable draining effect for some athletes. Be aware of the need for extra tank filling in these situations. Other tank drainers include ignoring and nonverbals, which are actions such as shaking your head, frowning, or turning away. 70% or more of communication is nonverbal, meaning coaches can fill and drain tanks without saying a word. What fills the tank? Correction, which can have a filling effect when the athlete perceives it as caring and helpful. Truthful and specific praise, expressing appreciation for actions like picking up equipment and being on time, listening, and nonverbals, such as nodding, clapping, smiling, and high fives. Each thing you do or say that fills your athlete's emotional tanks is a positive. Each thing you do or say that drains their emotional tanks is a negative. Keeping in mind that our corrections and decisions may sometimes be tank drainers, what is the best ratio of positives to negatives? More than 25 years of research indisputably concludes that we need an abundance of tank fillers compared to tank drainers. PCA suggests 5-to-1 as a target ratio for coaches. A good example is John Wooden, legendary UCLA championship basketball coach. 87% of his comments at practice were perceived as positive by his athletes. That's 5-to-1. If you strive to meet the magic ratio so that you keep your athletes' emotional tanks full, they are likely to perform better. We all have an emotional tank. When it's low, we tend to be pessimistic and we give up easily. When it's full, we're more optimistic and able to handle adversity. Athletes with full emotional tanks are more coachable. We will share proven tools for filling the emotional tank, and after this video, you can download a script for tank filling. The number one thing that most coaches can do to be more effective is to increase their plus-minus ratio. Remember that the 5-to-1 ratio involves any piece of coaching or interaction with our athletes that fills or drains their tanks. The tank fillers could include reinforcements of things we want our athletes to do. Of course, this doesn't mean we have to give 5 reinforcements every time we give a criticism, but coaches do have to build up a balance of positive reinforcements so that athletes can more readily accept correction. Achieving a 5-to-1 ratio is challenging, especially since as coaches and parents, we need to teach and correct our young athletes if we want them to improve. But when coaches do get close to that ratio of 5-to-1, magical things happen. It produces athletes with full emotional tanks. Kids who don't seem to be very motivated get excited, and they end up doing things they didn't think they could do. Whatever sport you coach, there are generally a lot more athletes than coaches on the team. You don't have to do all the tank filling. With the buddy system, your athletes can help you get to the magic ratio. Here are the steps for using the buddy system. Step 1. Pair your athletes up before a drill, practice, or competition. Have the athletes spend time with someone they might not normally. Step 2. Ask the athletes to take responsibility for filling each other's tanks using truthful and specific praise. Step 3. At the end of the drill or practice, ask kids to share what their buddy did to fill their tank. The buddy system offers many benefits. For example, athletes will practice communicating in a positive manner with each other consistently. Players will also learn that supporting teammates is an important part of being on any team. I know that athletes thrive on positive feedback, but my team makes so many mistakes. How can I give my athletes the feedback they need? Feel free to pause the video to jot down your ideas for how to handle the situation. Don't worry about being right or wrong. We're just brainstorming. Here are a few ideas to consider. It's important to provide feedback under the right conditions. Players are much more receptive to feedback when their emotional tanks are full. Criticism is easier to accept when it is delivered with patience and respect. Communicate clearly and give useful information. And try again if your message isn't received the first time. Giving criticism can be tricky because it tends to drain tanks. How you deliver your feedback plays a huge role in its effectiveness. You want to provide usable information at the right time and in the right way in order to empower your athletes. Here are ideas from coaches for how to make corrections in a way that's receivable and least likely to drain their emotional tanks. Avoid non-teachable moments. Identify the appropriate lesson for the appropriate time. A coach may try to give an athlete some technical instruction during a really pressure-packed competitive moment, but there is often too much emotion for the player to fully receive the feedback. Use if-then statements. If a basketball player wasn't using their legs enough in their shots, the coach may say, "Bend your knees more." If the player isn't receptive, try saying, "If you bend your knees more, then you'll get more range for your shots." It's a subtle difference, but the player will likely be much more receptive and the teaching much more impactful. Give criticism in private. It's not always possible in the middle of a competition or practice, but whenever possible, try to provide critical feedback privately, but not fully out of sight. Occasionally ask permission to give feedback. If the athlete says no, honor that and ask again later. You may find that the athlete is curious about what you were going to say. Try a criticism sandwich. The criticism is the meat, and the compliments are the slices of bread. For example, "Great job charging the ground ball. Next time, look to home to hold the runner before you throw to first. Keep throwing it like you did. That was a bullet." Next up, you can review a printable guide that shares more about kid-friendly criticism. Yogi Berra reportedly said, "It's amazing what you can see if you look." That's the philosophy behind the next tool we call positive charting, which is a method for increasing the number of right things that your athletes do. As a coach, you may tend to think it's your job to find things that are done incorrectly and improve them, but it's equally important to find things that are being done correctly and to reinforce them so athletes will continue doing them. You can download positive charting resources after this video. Let's look at 7 steps for using the positive charting form. Step 1. Write the name of each athlete on the positive charting form. If there's a specific action you want to look for, write it in the space marked "Look for." Step 2. When you see a player doing something positive, jot a note under the athlete's name. Remember to look for the team-building things athletes do, as well as physical actions. Step 3. Ask assistant coaches and other athletes to help with positive charting. It helps them view each other in a new perspective. Step 4. Record about the same number of comments for each athlete. Try to have 3 to 5 comments for each. Step 5. Be honest. Don't make something up that's not true. Step 6. At your next practice, start with a team meeting in which you talk about each athlete's positives for 30 seconds with the whole team. Step 7. Enjoy the positive energy of your athletes during the practice. That's your payoff for using positive charting. When it comes to competitions, many different emotions arise, especially towards the end of a game. You can use a winner's circle right after the game to focus on tank filling during this crucial time. Get your athletes into a circle and open the floor for tank filling comments. You can ask, "Who noticed someone doing something to help our team today?" You should generally speak last, and be sure to make comments about athletes who have not gotten tank filling from the others. End with a positive comment about the whole team. As a coach, your actions and words serve to fill or drain athletes' emotional tanks. The more you can do to fill emotional tanks, the more coachable your athletes will be and the more successful your team will be overall. As Barbara Frederickson of the University of North Carolina and PCA's National Advisory Board said, "Positive emotions are especially contagious, and a leader's positive emotions are more contagious than anyone else's."